For your time tonight, Chairman. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Happy holidays to you,
And
Liz.
to you, and Happy New Year. So I just want to start with a relatively new development. You are backing a person who I don't know that everyone is familiar with. Her name is Maria Sino. She is, however, originally a New Yorker. And you are backing her for the chairman of the National Republican Party over Michael Steele. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, Maria Sino is from New York, from Western New York. She was the executive director under Bill Paxton, who was then a congressman from Western New York during the '94 elections, which were tremendously successful for the Republican Party. We took over both houses of Congress for the first time since 1952. And then she went on to be the deputy chairman of the state party under Ed Gillespie. She's a very effective leader. She is ready to be chair, and she comes from New York State.
Well, okay, but you know, I know that there are a lot of people inside the Republican Party who aren't exactly huge fans of Michael Steele's, but you and Michael Steele in particular have not always seen eye to eye, basically on a number of things, including your support of Steve Levy to run for governor when he was a Democrat. Now he's, of course, a Republican. Is this a retaliation? Or some kind of...
Liz, it's not that we don't see eye to eye. It is that Michael Steele was not helpful to us here in New York State. He had divided the party here, and he, in fact, did not contribute much to the Get Out the Vote campaign, in fact, which he traditionally the National Committee does, and the money that was spent here was not very well utilized. We had to do our own Get Out the Vote program, which indeed was very effective, focusing on Central New York, on the Hudson Valley, and on Long Island, where we had crucial races, and we had to do that on our own. He was not helpful, and that's why I'm backing someone other than him to be chair of the party.
Okay, well, to play devil's advocate, though, I mean, his supporters would say he wasn't helpful because he didn't agree with your approach in the election, and he didn't agree with your supporting of a Democrat when there was a Republican, Rick Lazio, who was already in the running.
Steve Levy registered to be a Republican. He was tremendously helpful as a Republican county executive of Suffolk County in winning, for example, the Senate seat that Lee Zeldin won. Very effective there, winning the 2 assembly seats out there. And the National Committee, by its Rule 11, is not supposed to get involved in conventions or primary campaigns, and it did against its very rules. So he should not have done the things that he did. It was not helpful to us here in New York State. It was counterproductive.
Okay, you know, the leaders of the Assembly and the Senate, now we're talking about Brian Kolb and now newly minted Majority Leader Dean Skelos, have suggested that they didn't receive an enormous amount of support from the state party, that they did a lot on their own. I'm just curious if you could tell us exactly what it was that you did.
Let me stop you right there. That was Dean Skelos did not say that. Brian Kolb did indicate something along those lines in a quick interview that he did, but he was talking about funding for the Assembly, and we did try and help him, but it was very hard to. We did help on the funding side, the State Senate Committee. We raised several $100,000 for them. And, of course, our Get Out the Vote program, which was really very extensive, focused in the place where their Senate seats, helped win several of the very crucial Senate seats, and Dean understands that, and we had a very good working relationship throughout the campaign.
I'm sorry, Chairman, what do you mean it was difficult to help the Assembly minority? I mean, they actually, just for a second, they're still waiting.
I'm talking about fundraising, Liz. That's what he was addressing.
I see.
And that was difficult for him, and we tried to help on that score, but people wanted to give to the Senate campaigns or to the congressional campaigns or to the state party. That's what I was addressing.
Okay, but in terms of giving them support for Get Out the Vote or maybe for their mail?
I emphasized right from the start the need for our county chairs, for the state committee, to focus on winning Assembly seats. That's the way we fill up our bench, and we paid attention to doing a Get Out the Vote effort, where not only were there congressional seats overlapping with Senate seats, but were there Assembly seats also. And I think that Get Out the Vote effort, which Brian Kolb has said publicly, was very effective in helping win. You know, we have 17 new members of the Assembly, of which at least 8 were pickups from Democratic seats, maybe 9, depending what happens in the Kerwin race.
You know, looking back on the campaign, though, after the elections were all over and the dust had settled from Carl Palladino and Steve Levy, and before that Rick Lazio, you know, people criticized you, actually, and said that you had not managed that correctly. Of course, you ended up with a guy, Carl Palladino, who was pretty controversial, and he was not your first pick. Do you have regrets about the way it turned out?
I don't have any regrets at all. Steve Levy would have been a tremendous candidate. I think I've had a number of people have come up to me, and I think the growing consensus is he would have been by far the better candidate to take on Andrew Cuomo. In fact, I just saw Eliot Spitzer this morning by chance, and he said, you know, Steve Levy would have beaten Andrew Cuomo. I think he certainly would have given a very, very good race, and that would have been very good for our down ballot candidates. As it turned out, though, the National Committee came in against its rules, weighed in for a person who was a weaker candidate, person who did not debate Carl Palladino when that person should have, and the results were that that Carl, who could have been strengthened by that debate, certainly, if not Rick winning that, we turned out not to have, coming out of the late primary, September 14th, a candidate who could, in fact, give a very effective race to Andrew Cuomo.
The idea that you and Eliot Spitzer agree on something, I find a little bit surprising.
Well, he expressed that opinion very, very quickly, and I think a lot of others agree, Democrats and Republicans, that Steve Levy would have been by far the strongest. Look, he had a very good record as a very fiscally conservative Democrat who had no future in his party because he was against the special interests of his party and wanted to become a Republican, and he would have run a very good race. But look, we had successes across the board. I mean, the 6 congressional seats that we picked up were a record. You have to go back to 1946 to find that we picked up as many. That was more than any other state in the United States. Ohio and Pennsylvania each picked up 5, Illinois 4, and others going down from there. The 9 assembly seats that we picked up, Brian Kolb couldn't be more thrilled. That if in fact we get that 9th, he will have 51 seats. Our stronger minority in the assembly will be players, and of course, getting a majority in the state Senate. You know, there are 10 very Democratic states, of which New York and Massachusetts, by any objective measure, are right at the top, and California is the 10th, much lighter shade of blue than New York. And in all those, there are 20 houses of legislature, and the only one that's held by Republicans of those 20 will be the New York state legislature held by Republicans.
How long do you think that the Republicans are actually going to be able to hold on? Because, you know, there will be redistricting, of course. It's supposed to be nonpartisan. I mean, that was the agreement, including by the entire Republican conference and the majority leader, Dean Skelos, who signed the pledges for former New York City Mayor Ed Koch. And then in 2012, there's going to be a presidential, which brings out a lot of Democrats in a Democrat-dominated state.
We have we didn't have this before the 2009 elections, but starting in the 2009 elections and with the conversion of Steve Levy to being a Republican, we now have 14 of the 17 county execs. Those are the most important counties outside of New York City. We now have, instead of 2 members of Congress, we have 8 members of Congress. Rather than having no power in Albany at all, we now have a majority control of the state Senate. Rather than having 39 members of the Assembly, we now have 50 or 51 members of the Assembly.
I hear you. You had a good year.
That's a real base.
You had a good year.
That's a base on which we can build, and we have to build on that base. This is a year for building the party from the bottom up, for coordinating with our legislators on messaging with respect to the basic Republican philosophy, which New York badly needs at this point if it's going to be pro-growth, and that is to cutting taxes, cutting spending, cutting regulations, and bringing the economy and jobs back to New York State. That's the Republican theme.
You had a good year, except that you lost 2 of the statewide races that people thought that you most likely could have won, and that would be Harry Wilson for Comptroller and Dan Donovan for State Attorney General. So what happened there?
But if you take those 10 very Democratic states again, Again, Massachusetts and New York are the most Democratic of them. California, at least, you've got Illinois, Maryland, and Connecticut in between, and other smaller states there. There are 38 statewide races, including 9 governorships, 9 U.S. Senate races, and of those, we won only 2. And the only big one was winning Obama's Senate seat in Illinois, in a much lighter shade of blue state, Illinois, than New York State. And then we won the lieutenant governorship in Vermont. That's all we won of those 38 statewide races in these very Democratic states. New York is a very tough state. We're going to have to work very hard to build a party here, but this is the year to build a party from the bottom up, because we won't